Map, filter and reduce are higher order functions in JavaScript. Don't know what higher order functions are? Shame on you. Go ahead, check my previous video in this series, you will get to know what higher order functions are. Most of the people understand what map, filter and reduce are, but don't know where to use it. In this video, we will be covering what is map, filter and reduce, and we will take a lot of examples to see where you can use these functions. So let's just begin. Let's roll the intro. Hey, bas. First of all, let's just start with our map function. So map function is basically used to transform an array. Suppose we have this array 5, 1, 3, 2, 6 are the values in it. And suppose if we want to transform it, what do I mean by transformation? So transformation means, suppose if you want to transform each and every value of this array and get a new array out of it. So this is one of the transformation of this array, which is double of this array. Okay. When I say double, it means each and every value in this transformed array is double the original value. Or this is one of the transformation, which means that each and every value is triple the original value. And one of the transformation could be finding out binary of each of these individual elements in that original array. So these three are the transformation, and there can be a lot. Okay. So I am just giving you an example that if you want to transform this whole array, you can do it with map function. And here is when map function is used. So let's now see how we can write that code. So to find out the output, let's just initialize a variable const output. Okay. And how we will call a map function on an array. Let's now see that. So first of all, we need to write the array, which is ARR in this case, and we used to have a dot operator, and after that we write map. Okay. And then basically you have to pass in a function inside this, a function which basically tells you that what transformation do we need. Do we want to double? Do we want to triple? Or do we want to find binary? Or what do we need to do? What is the transformation logic? What we need to apply to each and every value of this array? That is what we need to pass inside this map. For over here, suppose let's take an example to double these values. So let's just pass double inside it. So this double should be a function, isn't it? So let's create a function double. Okay. Let's call it function double. So what it will do is basically it will double the values. How do you write a function to double these values? Just do a x into 2. Great. So this doubles the value of x. It returns x into 2. And we pass this transformation function, okay, in this array.map. What does it internally do is it will run this function over each and every value of this array and create a new array out of it. And that new array will be inside output. So let's just do a console log and see what we get inside our output, right? So if we do a console log of output and save the file, here we see something. Let me just show you. See, the output is 10, 2, 4, 6, 12. So suppose if you wanted to triple these values, so how would you do that? You can just, instead of passing double over here, we can use a function triple. How do you write a function triple? This basically is a transformation logic. You can call it as a transformation logic. Okay. So if we had to triple, we just need to return what? Yes, you guessed it absolutely right. So we just want to do a x into 3. Okay. We need to pass in triple over here, right? So if we refresh the page, see, we get this output 5, 3, 9, 6, 18. So that's what we wanted, right? The triple of these arrays. Now let us see how we can transform binary. Can anyone of you guess that? Let's just see. So we just have to pass in binary over here, right? So what is the logic for writing binary? Let's just create a new function, binary, okay? And how do you convert a number to a binary? So you just need to return x.toString of 2, isn't it? And just pass in binary over here. So if we write this, see what we got. So we got this binary of each of these numbers. So 5 is 101 and similarly. So that's how we write map function. Now, let me tell you one more thing. In a lot of places, you will find something like this, that instead of writing the code like this, some people also prefer to just put a function inside it And calm down, my friends. This is totally valid syntax in JavaScript. People who are coming from different languages pull their hairs when they see such syntax. But this is a perfectly valid JavaScript code. You can pass in functions like this. Okay, that is what is known as higher order functions. Remember? Okay, so you can also write this and this will behave the same way. See, you get the same output. So this is one way of writing it. And a lot of places you will also find that some people write arrow functions inside it. You just have this syntax. Okay, so I'm just showing you in case you encounter this and you just don't know what is happening. So this is the same thing. Okay, this is basically an anonymous function over here which we pass in, and in fact we can even remove this return statement. So when there is only one line inside this function which is returning something, so we can just directly like remove this, and we can remove these curly braces as well. So this is also the same thing what the function does. So basically, if you want to transform a number array to a binary array of those values, you can do it like this. Okay, this is a perfectly valid syntax. And if you observe clearly, my friends, this actually makes a lot of sense. See, you write Array.map. So it is basically mapping each of these values. And what is the mapping logic? Okay, what is the mapping logic? It is that X or each and every value is transformed to its binary. Okay, so it is like mapping each and every value to another value and creating an array and returning it into output. Okay, so that is what map function does, and that's all it is. So this was a very basic example. We will cover a little more advanced example later on in this video, but let us first see what filter and reduce does. So first of all, let us just get rid of all this code. So let's now talk about filter function. So filter function is basically used to filter.
What?
So filter function is basically used to filter. No, I'm not kidding, but yes, filter function is actually used to filter the values inside an array. Okay, so if we are given this array, right, 5, 1, 3, 2, 6, suppose we want to filter out all the values which are odd inside it. Suppose if we want to filter out each and every value which is greater than 4 inside this particular array, so it will result out to 6 and 5. Or maybe we just want to filter out all the even numbers inside array, or maybe we want to filter out all the numbers which are divisible by 3 inside this particular array. So you are kind of like taking this array as an input and finding out an array which has only the values which are filtered based on some logic. Okay, so let's just see how we can write that. So let's now take a very basic example and let's now try to filter out all the odd values inside this array. Okay, so how we can do that? So to find the output, let us again create a const output. Okay, and what we will do is now we will call a filter method over array. So we will do Array.filter and we will write the filter logic inside this. So now the filter logic would be to find out odd values inside this array, right? So maybe we need to write a function over here which is basically which checks whether a value is odd or not. So maybe let's write a logic is odd. Okay, and this is basically again a function. Oh shit, I misspelled it. Function is odd. Okay, and is odd basically takes an value and checks whether this value X is odd or not. How do you write that logic? You just do a X mod by 2 and it basically checks whether a value is odd or not. So that is how it filters. Let's now see our output over here. And if we print it, see, we get 5, 1, 3. And why there is no 2 and 6? Because when this function was checked against 2 and 6, so basically it returned false, isn't it? So similarly, if we just had to filter out all the even values, so how we could have done is, maybe we just pass in a function filter even, and how do you find even values? So even values are the ones where X mod by 2 is equal to 0, isn't it? Right? We can do a even, right? Filter is even. So if we see only 2 and 6 are filtered out. Now suppose if we want to find out all the values which are greater than 4. Okay, so what we should do over here, again return X is greater than 4, right? So it just gives you 5 and 6, right? So that's how we can do. Or maybe just, okay, so we had a bad name, greater than 4. Okay, greater than 4, and let's have a greater than 4 here. So this gives you again greater than 4 values, right? So that's how the filter function works. And again over here in this filter function, instead of just passing this greater than 4 like this, maybe you can just copy this function and pass in directly over here like this. Okay, it works perfectly fine. Again, it gives the same result. Or maybe just use a arrow function. So I'm just showing you all this so that you are habitual of seeing this type of code, okay, and you don't get frustrated when you see such code written, okay, and it makes sense to you. So, and maybe some people write like this as well. So this is a perfectly valid code. So this video is not just about explaining what the filter function is doing, but also when you read the code, you should be able to understand and build the mental model of what is happening in the code, right? So if you read this code, you should be aware of that, okay, arr.filter, what is arr? Arr is this array, right? This array.filter, and what is the filter logic? You only filter if x is greater than 4. Okay, that means all the values which are greater than 4 will be filtered out, right? Suppose if I do, all the values less than 3 would be filtered out. So, sorry, 3 would be filtered out. See, you will get 1 and 2, right? So that's how you should be reading this code and understanding and writing this code, okay? So this was a very easy example, but we will take a little more advanced example. But first, let us cover reduce. A lot of people have texted me that please make reduce video, please make reduce video. So here we are. We will learn what is reduce now. So first of all, let us just get rid of this code. Okay. So now let us see what is reduce. So just like the name suggests, reduce, it actually does not reduce anything. You know, if I was given an option, I would never name this function reduce, okay? Because it is so confusing when it says reduce. We don't know what it is reducing. What does that reduce means, okay? Filter makes sense, map makes sense. You are mapping one-to-one value, but says reduce. So now let us just talk about the reduce function. So reduce function is basically used at a place where you have to take all the elements of an array and come up with a single value out of them. Okay, so it sounds confusing, but let me give you an example. To give you an example, maybe suppose if you have to take this array and you have to iterate over each and every element and find out sum of all these elements in this array, right? Or maybe just try to iterate all these array and find out the largest or the maximum number inside this array. So how would you do that? Here you can use reduce, okay? Maybe to find sum or maybe to find maximum number inside this array, okay? So let's just take an example to see how we can write this reduce function. But before moving on to that, okay, before moving on to that, if I'll directly just jump on to writing the reduce function, it will not make any sense to you. First of all, what we will do, we will just write down a code how we used to write in a non-functional way, okay, non-functional programming way. Then we will move on to writing the reduce function, okay. That way you will be better able to understand the reduce function. So just bear with me for 2 minutes, okay. So let us just first try to write a normal function, okay. Let's call it find sum, okay, which finds the sum of these array, right, arr, if we pass on arr inside it. So to find sum of all these values of arr, what we will do, we will basically have a variable which is sum and we will just assign it with 0, right? This will be a place where we will be calculating our sum, and then what we'll do, we'll just generally write a for loop, okay? And then what we will do, we will just iterate over each and every element, right? And what we will do, we will just keep on appending that inside our sum variable. Sum is equals to sum plus arr of I, right? And what we will do, we will just do that again and again for each and every value of arr of I. And what we'll do, we will just return the sum. That's how we'll do, right? This is what the code will be. Let's just check it. If we check the result, what we can do, sum, find sum, and we call it with arr, and what's the result? So we get 17 over here. So now if we had to do the same thing using reduce, okay, so reduce is used in this place where you need to iterate over all the elements and find out a particular value, okay. So in this case it was sum, right? So how we can transform this logic and write a reduce function instead. So now I'll show you that. for that, let's take a const, let's call it output, okay? And over here, we will write arr.reduce. Just like map and filter, we use arr.reduce. Now this reduce takes a function inside it. Now this function has two parameters. Now listen to me very carefully. This is the most confusing part for a lot of developers. This function takes two parameters. Listen to me very carefully. First is the ACC, that's a accumulator, and the second one is current. Okay, I remember like this. Okay, accumulator and current. So now what are these accumulator and current? Let's just see in a moment. So when you write like this, right, arr.reduce, basically this function is iterated over each and every element of this array. Okay, so this reduce basically iterates this function over each and every elements of this array, and what it will do is this current or the second parameter represents the value of when we are iterating, right? When we are iterating this function or we are running this function against each and every value, this current represents the value, like these values inside this reduce function. Okay, so this function over here, current will be these values, and this accumulator, right, the first parameter basically is used to accumulate the values, okay, or accumulate the result what we have to get out of those values which are present in the arrays. So in this example, we needed to find the sum, right? So how did we do in a traditional way? We initialized this sum and we were accumulating our sum inside this sum variable, right? So similarly, we will use an accumulator to accumulate these values. So what we will do, and this current is basically the current values which are represented in this particular array. So if we have to compare this example and with this function find sum with this function, so the current is basically this arr of I, okay, over here, and the accumulator in this case is the sum. So how would we write over here is, so accumulator is equals to, what we need to accumulate in it? Sum, right? So how do we calculate sum? We will do a accumulator plus. Now what? ARR of I, instead of ARR of I, we basically write cur, which is our current value, right? And what we will do, we will just return this accumulator. And one more thing to notice over here is, so in this function, basically this accumulator is acting like this sum variable, right? And it is just accumulating all these values. It is just iterating. This function is being run against each of these values inside this array, and basically accumulator is just appending a sum of the current value to itself, right? So accumulator should be initialized with an initial value for the first go, right? So the initial value, how do we pass an initial value to an accumulator? So that is basically the second argument to this reduce function. So this reduce function basically takes second argument. So the first argument is a function and the second argument is any initial value which you need to pass inside this accumulator. Okay, so the initial value over here would be 0 for sum, isn't it? This is how we will write this whole logic inside our reduce function. And if we do a console log of output now, let's do a console log of output. If we save it, see, we got 17 once again. So basically, this whole logic is exactly similar to this find sum logic. So now let's come to a tricky example where you need to find out the maximum value inside this array. So let us first write down that logic over here. Let's just modify this find sum and try to find max inside this array. How do we find out the maximum inside that array? Let us suppose, for now, this sum is max, okay? So we need to find out maximum value inside this value. What we will do, we will just iterate over each value and we will see if our current value is greater than maximum. So maximum would be that current value, right? How will we write? If our current value is ARR of I is greater than maximum, what we will do? We will just override our maximum with the ARR of I, else we don't do anything. So we will just iterate, and if our ARR or ARR of I or any of these values becomes greater than the maximum value, then what happens? Maximum becomes this ARR of I, and then we just return maximum, right? That's how it works, isn't it? So if I just comment down and just save it, so if you find out some, okay, not find some, find max, let's run it and see if it works. Yes, so we got this 6, right? This 6 is the maximum value. So now we have written our find max function. Now we will write the same logic using reduce, but this time we won't be doing any cheating. Okay, we won't be using this as a reference, and we would try to write down reduce by ourselves. Okay, let's try to write it. Okay, so if we do a const output, okay, can you just guess what we will do now? Yes, you are absolutely right. We will do a array.reduce, right? Array.reduce, and we will write a function over here, right? And this function takes 2 parameters. What were those? Yes, the accumulator and the current. Over here, now what we will do? First of all, we have to think that the second argument to this reduce function would be the initial value of accumulator. So the initial value, to find out the maximum, let us give it 0. So why 0? Because we are just assuming that the array would be non-empty and it always have positive numbers. So the least possible value the maximum could have would be 0, right? So that's why the initial value is 0. Now we'll try to write the main logic. Now remember what I told you, this function will be called against each and every value of this array. So what happens is, now we want to, and this accumulator is basically acting as the max now, right? So what we will do, we will at each point of time, for each and every current value, we will check if our current value is greater than our maximum till point. Okay, maximum till point is our accumulator over here. If it is, then what we will do? We will just assign the maximum value to that accumulator, isn't it? So now our maximum value or the accumulator becomes the current value. Okay, so instead of calling this accumulator, let's call it max. That will make more sense. So it's just a label, right? We use accumulator as a generic term, but ideally, let's call it max. So now assume, so the initial value of max was 0, and we will check at each current value or each point that if the current is greater than our max, then what we will do? Our max becomes current, and we just return our max. Great. So that's how we should write it. So let's just save this and try to do a console log of our output. If we do it, see, we got 6. So that's how we write this logic. I know there can still be some confusions with map, filter and reduce. That is why I have a little more real world examples for you for map, filter and reduce. Just give me 5 more minutes. We will run down through these examples and your knowledge of map, filter and reduce will be more strengthened, and trust me, you won't forget this lifetime. Let's take few more examples. You will love it. Seriously, just hold on. So first of all, let's just get rid of this code, and for the next example, let us take a little more complicated version of this array. Okay, so suppose we have this array of objects, and each and every object over here has 3 properties, which are first name, last name and the age. Okay, so this is basically like the data what we get from API. Assume that this is coming from some API. Okay, this is the list of users, right? This is a more real world example. So now suppose we are given a task to find out the list of full name of all these users. Okay, list of full names. So it will look something like this. Okay, so the full name of the first user is Akshay Saini, and similarly we have the second item in the list should be Donald Trump. So suppose if we have to find a list like that, and so on. Okay, so we want to find a list with the full name. Okay, so now can you guess what function would we use over here? What function would be used over here? So it is exactly, you are absolutely right. We would be using map over here. Let us just quickly write it. So first of all, as usual, let's take our constant output, and then what we do, we will write users.map, and what will we pass inside is, now just see carefully. I am writing a arrow function directly. We had x, and what do we need to map it to? So the x is basically this object, right? As I told you that this function which you pass inside map will run against each of these objects, right? Each of these values inside this array. So over here, this x basically represent the first item of this users. So basically this object. So what this x should map to? X, and then what does this function return? X dot first name plus x dot last name, right? So if we save it, and that's all it is, seriously, that's all you need to do. If we just run this, now see, we got Akshay, Saini. Okay, so we did not get the space as intended, so let us just put a space also. So we can do like this. So that's how it is, right? We got our current output. This is what we wanted, right? Now we got a list where we have full name of each of these objects. So here is when we can use map. So let's just take one more tricky example. It would be really awesome. Okay, so let's just see this. This is tricky. Okay, it is a challenge for you. While I am doing, you should be able to do this. Okay, suppose if this is the same array what we use, and now we have to find out how many users have a particular age. Okay, so let me just explain you. If suppose this user list is given, we need to find out that what are different age inside this array, and how many people are with the same age. So suppose how many people have age 26 inside this. So there are 2 people with age 26 inside this, right? So our map should be like this. So we should get, and how many people are there with 75 age? It is 1. How many people are with 50 age? It is 1. So similarly, suppose we had a very huge list of users. So we need to find out that how many people are of a particular age. Okay, so particular unique age, I would say. So there are 2 people with 26. Okay, and there is 1 person with 75 and 1 with 50. So that's how we need to make this. So now can you guess what would we use over here? Can you guess? Should we use map? Should we use filter? Should we use reduce, or nothing? We can't use anything. I'll give you a moment to think. Think it once again. Pause the video and think it if you can't. Because this is really nice example. Okay, if you are able to do this, then your reduce concepts are clear. Oh shit, I give you a hint. So yes, we would be using reduce. We would be using reduce. Why we would be using reduce? Because we are using this array and we need to find one value inside it. Okay, we don't want a list over here now. We wanted one object. Okay, and object should have different unique values with the count of individual value. So we would be using reduce over here because we want to reduce our array to a particular value which is an object. Okay, that's great. Let's just try to write the logic now. So just like always, let us just create a const output for now. And what should we do now? Okay, we will just write users.reduce. And remember, what does reduce take? Reduce take a function. It has the first parameter as accumulator, the second parameter as current, and we basically, the second argument to this reduce function is basically the initial value of this accumulator. So over here, our accumulator is basically this object, right? The initial value of our accumulator, what it will be? The initial value would be empty object, isn't it? Because when there is no data present in it, there would be empty object. And now we will slowly be appending these values to it, right? And remember, what does this current function holds? So this function, when this function is iterated or is run against each of these values of this array, because that's what reduce do, right? Reduce will run this function against each of these values, right? So this current will be this particular object at the first point, right? What we need to do with it? What we need to do? Can you just guess? So we need to check if our accumulator of current dot age, right? Current dot age. What is current dot age? current.age is 26. We need to check if our accumulator of 26, is it even present or not, right? There could be a case like this empty object, right? So there is a case where our accumulator of 26 or accumulator of current.age is not there, right? If it is there, we will do something, but if it is not there, what should we do? So let's write the else condition first. If our accumulator of age like 26 is not present, then what we should do? We should just initially assign it with 1, isn't it? Make sense? So initially, if our 26 was not there inside this object, initial object, we would just do a 26 and put in 1 inside it, right? And then, so this function will basically run for each and every value, right? Each and every value inside this array. So suppose if now the current is this value, okay, this 75. So what it will do, again, it will check if accumulator of 75 is present or not. No, it is not there. It will assign it to 1. So now this will be added to your accumulator. Now it will go to this object. It will see 50. It will just append this 51. Now is the tricky and an interesting case. So if our accumulator of current of age or accumulator of 26 is already present, what we will do now? We will just do a accumulator of current age, and it's simple, right? We will just do a plus plus of accumulator of current age. That's all we need to do, isn't it? And we will just return our accumulator from this function. Simple, right? So let's just try to see this. And let's just try to console log our output first of all, okay, and see if this works or not. Fingers crossed. Let's just run it. Yes. So what we got, see, we got this object with 26 as 2, 50 as 1, 75 as 1, and that's what we wanted, right? So this is how you can write the reduce function and leverage it. I took this example because I wanted to show you that reduce can be used in a lot of places, okay? So you need to have that mental model that if you have an array and you need to iterate over that array and come up to a single value out of it, so most probably you can use reduce and do that stuff. So basically that is where reduce comes into picture, and this is what the power of functional programming is. You can pass in these functions and you can leverage them to write such beautiful code. We have already seen the examples of map and reduce, right? Now let's just take a quick example of filter to revise, and then we would end this video, okay? Just give me 2-3 more minutes. Okay, very easy, very easy. Okay, this example is basically if we are given this user list, we need to filter out, or we need to find out the first name of all the people whose age is less than 30. Okay, first name of all the people whose age is less than 30. Can you solve it? Pause for a moment, pause this video and think. Okay, first name of all the people whose age is less than 30. So let's just write it now. Okay, so let's just quickly write it. As always, let's do a const output, and let's just do a users.filter. Now I would be writing a arrow function. Okay, just carefully listen to me, and I'm going a little slow. If our x over here would be this object, right? If our x.age is less than 30, filter out all these objects which have age less than 30. Okay, let's just save it. And if we see the output, so now we got all these objects which have age less than 30, right? We got this object, but remember the problem statement? The problem statement was to find out the first name of those people. So interesting, isn't it? Now you tell me how we can do this. We were expecting our output to be Akshay and Deepika, right? This is what we expected. But instead we got this objects. Why I took this example was I wanted to tell you an interesting thing, that a power of these functions is chaining. Okay, you can chain, map, filter and reduce. What I mean by chaining is, suppose if you filter this array, now you can run a map over it as well. Okay, now we can write a dot map in front of it also. This is what I wanted to tell you. Now this map will be running on the output of this. The output of this was these objects, right? And now we can do a map of these and find out x and x dot first name. Make sense? So we get the desired output, right? We got Akshay and Deepika, right? This is what we needed, right? We need to filter. So how did this work? Let's just break down and see once again. Just give me 1 minute. I'll explain you. So first we take users, and what we did with this object is we filtered it out. Okay. What did we filter? We filter out X, and X's age is less than 30. So all the people, give me list of all these objects which has X.age is less than 30. So what happened? This user array now shrinked down and it removed all these values. Okay. It basically just was left with these people, right? With X.age less than 30, right? And then we ran the map over these array. Okay. And now what is the function which we pass inside map? We just needed the first name. So we did a x.firstname. So now basically the output what we got was exactly what we wanted. Isn't it? It's beautiful, isn't it? This is how you can chain these methods also. But now before we end this video, I want to tell an interesting thing. You can achieve the same thing instead of doing .filter and .map with a reduce also. Yes, you can even use reduce to come up to this solution. You just need to know how to write it. Okay, so this is a task for you. This is a homework for you. Can you just find out all the people with age less than 30 and get the list of the first names of that using reduce? So this is a challenge for you. This is a homework for you. I want you to code that in the comment section. Write down your code. I want to see your code. Okay. So you need to get to this point using a reduce. But I gave you this example just to show you that you can chain these methods. That's all what my motive was, but you can use a reduce to just get to this output. Okay. And now in the next video, we will be covering the polyfills of map, filter and reduce. This is asked so many times in interviews, and I'm telling you, if you are giving interviews for full stack or UI roles, polyfill of reduce, polyfill of map, filter, reduce, these things are asked so much. So what we will do is, this was coming, I was getting a lot of requests in comments, so I thought that let me make videos out of it. So the next videos will be the polyfill of map, filter and reduce. We would be covering all of that. We would be covering all the corner cases, and I would exactly explain you how you have to tell in interviews so that you get 10 on the 10 in the interviews. Okay, so are you ready? So go ahead and check out that video. Before moving on to that video, give this video a thumbs up. Just write down in comments whether you understood these concepts or not. And thank you so much for watching Namaste JavaScript.